I'm not sure that the global debt bubble will blow. And the reason is that the political consequences to the ruling class are terminal. Yeah. Or as the French would say, you've got heads on spikes. We saw the extent, we have seen the extent, 1979, 1980, 81, 82, 1987, 1991, 2001, 2007 through 2011, 2020. We have seen the extent to which the powers that be have the financial wherewithal to keep the bubble, not the bubble bursting, but the negative consequences for individuals and corporations to a minimum. Paper it over, and then suck out the liquidity. And that mechanism will be used in the future. We will have recessions. We will have financial crises. It will look like the bubble is bursting. The guys on the internet swinging their arms, waving around. Some of them are saying it's going to happen April 23rd. Yeah, the full nonsense. And then steps will be taken to limit the damage and destruction. We'll pick up the pieces and we'll move forward the way we did from 2012 through 2019 before the pandemic. All of that can be upset by politics. And that's the biggest concern that we have right now. Gold and silver will do well. They will not be used to back currencies. That's a fantasy. Why bother investing in silver? I think I just spent 2 hours telling you why. Because it's a good investment. Because it should be part of it. If you add silver to your diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds and currencies, you will find that you can enhance your long-term return better, more, while reducing the risk, the volatility of the value of your wealth. And that's really the major reason. So to put that in a different term, you can create beta and you can create alpha, or you can use silver. If you invest in silver, you can have, it will help you preserve your capital, your wealth, and it will help you generate more wealth. And that's why you should invest in silver. I have some slides that I threw in the back, but just in case we needed them. We've gone on for 2 hours plus. I will ask Carlos if there are any questions that are worth responding to that have come in over the interim. I think there's a lot of questions. Carlos?
Hi, Jeff. Yeah, great Q&A that you know several days. But one of the questions is it easy to collect secondary silver recovery data?
No. The secondary refiners have no vested interest in disclosing information. It's in their economic interest to not disclose information. And in addition to that, there are technical and mechanical issues about it. CPM Group has had many secondary refiners as clients over the years, and that allows us to build up confidential, trusting relations where they will give us information. We had put together a proposal with the China Gold Association. In China, they have very good secondary recovery data for gold, silver, and other metals because it's a communist country. Yeah, it's like, hey, I'm sorry, but you're going to tell us what you're doing. And if you don't tell us what you're doing, there are severe economic and political and actually personally physical consequences to not telling us the truth. So China has a very good network for collecting information on secondary recovery of silver and gold and other metals. And we were working with the China Gold Association prior to the Trump administration. Put together a proposal to have a black box program to collect data on the sources of raw materials from gold and silver refineries around the world. I can't remember the numbers, but if there are 300 or let's say 250 gold and silver refiners around the world, maybe 100 or fewer than that are members of the LBMA network that collects data and are registered with the LBMA as good delivery refiners. And it used to be even fewer because the demand for physical silver from fabricators was great enough to suck up a tremendous amount of secondary recovery of silver. So a secondary refiner could say, I don't want to deal with all of the expenses and hassles and personalities involved with becoming a registered good delivery refiner with the COMEX or with London, because I can sell all my silver directly to fabricators. They know, they get an assay, they see it's good, it's of the proper grade, it has the right impurities or lacks the bad impurities. They can see that our silver is good enough for them, and they can get it at a small discount, pennies, a few pennies an ounce over good delivery registered. That changed probably around 2016 or so, when the silver demand started to fall off, and these silver refiners found they had metal that they had to sell to dealers, and the dealer said, no, I can only accept good delivery. So you saw several refiners become registered good delivery refiners, but they don't deliver information on their volumes. We had put together this proposal with the China Gold Association to create a global black box program to collect data. And what we found was zero interest on the part of the mining industry or the market managers outside of China in participating and underwriting that program. So we still collect data from refiners around the world anecdotally, and we still pull that together. We survey refiners that will talk to us, and we know what kind of percentages that they have of their market share, and we estimate it that way. But it's very difficult to come up with that otherwise. Other questions?
Okay, another. Are there any five pockets besides India, where physical silver is as a means of saving?
Yeah, in Malaysia, there is a very interesting organization in Malaysia, gold and silver, and in other Islamic countries and in other South Asian and Southeast Asian countries, gold and silver are used as a media for exchange. And we have, again, there's an organization in Malaysia that has a very interesting program for doing this, especially in rural areas. And they have been invited by other Islamic nations to bring their structure to those countries. And we were working with them again, prior to the pandemic in Trump administration. Trump administration created a lot of frictions between the United States and China, and the United States and other countries. And in China, the government said, no new initiatives with the United States until political conditions improve. And in fact, they haven't improved throughout the Trump era and throughout the Biden era to date. And we don't see any prospect for them improving because of U.S. political posturing. We just don't see the U.S. willing to do that. And that's true in other countries as well. So this initiative to use silver and gold and as a form of savings, an alternative of savings, has been put on hold for now.
Okay, another question. This a little bit. Do you have an opinion about silver ETFs, SLV ETF?
I'm sorry, you were breaking up there.
Okay, the question is, do you have an opinion about investing in silver via ETFs? For example, the SLV ETF.
Oh, I see. Well, I have an opinion. I'm just reading it too. ETFs make sense for shorter term investors and for longer term investors. And one of the things that we saw was when the gold ETF was created, the GLD and the 20 some odd others, you saw people who were not necessarily physical gold investors. They were gold mining share investors, or they were not involved in gold investments at all, come into the GLD and gold ETFs. When the silver ETFs were created, there's this big surge of silver delivered into the SLV and other ETFs. Now, what it was people who were holding silver in 1,000-ounce bars, that they had bought when the price was $5, so it was a $5,000 investment, and now the price was $15, or it was over $10 an ounce. So it was a reportable tax thing if you sold it. And what we saw were any number of people who were selling their 1,000-ounce bars and buying ETFs because it was easier for them. They thought it was an easier way to own silver. And also gave them the opportunity to buy and sell and trade and make money on their silver holdings through the ETFs. So you could, you take a 1,000-ounce bar, it's yours. It's sitting in your basement or it's sitting in a depository someplace. You transfer that into an ETF, and now all of a sudden you can keep that silver. You don't have it in the basement. You don't have to worry about someone stealing it. You don't have to. I used to have a 100-ounce silver bar that I used as a doorstop. And when my first child was born in 1984, my wife made me put it in a safe because she was convinced that as he became mobile, he would pull it over and smash his toes. You don't have to worry about that if you've got an ETF. And you can buy and sell small increments of it. So ETFs are good for investors who want to have that increased facility to try to generate alpha from their physical silver. So yeah, I like them.
Okay, turning back to platinum and palladium, one question is it true that the Russians are selling platinum to fund their war efforts in Ukraine and are thus putting pressure on the price of platinum?
We haven't seen that. In fact, we've seen a decline in the amount of platinum and palladium coming out of Russia for other reasons. And Norilsk Nickel has the right to sell its own platinum and palladium. It pays a lot of taxes and government fees when it sells and exports platinum and palladium, which generates revenue for the government. But what we have seen is that Norilsk has had some production issues because they can't get some of the supplies, reagents, and equipment that they need to maintain their mining, smelting, and refining operations. So we've actually seen a reduction in platinum and palladium exports from Russia due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So that's not where the downward pressure on platinum and palladium prices is coming from.
Okay, another question turning back to silver. Do artisanal miners add much to silver inventories each year? how do you try to quantify silver production from artisanal miners?
That's a really tough area because it's very secretive and it's very private. Um, you've seen, for example, in Peru and Ecuador, in Bolivia, in Alaska, uh, in other parts of the world, we have increased our estimates of artisanal production sharply over the last 4 decades as we've become aware that there's much more metal coming into the markets there. Now, one of the things that's happening in all of those jurisdictions I mentioned, with the possible exception of Alaska, is that governments have tried to regularize artisanal mining. They tried to be more aware of who's doing it and how much is coming in. They're worried about environmental degradation. They're worried about using mercury to separate the gold, for example. They're worried about a variety of other issues, and they're not collecting taxes on a lot of this. So one of the things that they've tried to do is to find third parties, private companies, to provide services. So you'll have companies now from around the world who will buy gold and silver from artisanal miners in Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, and other countries, and then ship it overseas to be refined. And part of that has to do with the no dirty gold type of movement. You want to know, you want more responsible tracking of where the silver and gold are coming from. Part of it has to do with trying to limit the environmental degradation. Part of it has to do with trying to collect taxes on it. So we have seen that, but it's a very difficult thing. And one of the things that we have learned over the last 4 decades is the extent to which there's an enormous amount of metal there. I mean, we were working with one company, mining company in Bolivia, and a significant portion of their silver was actually being mined by artisanal miners who are accessing their property from the other side of the mountain. So they were mining on one side of the mountain and producing silver, but they were also buying silver from people who would come to them, selling them artisanal silver output that clearly came from their own property. That was more than a decade ago, and I think that probably is still continuing, although government intervention may have helped shut it down some.
Okay, and another question. Do your sources indicate that there has been a significant increase in demand globally for silver in the military applications in the past year or so?
No, they don't. We've talked about this. There's some outrageously unrealistic numbers about how much silver is used in missiles. We've talked to people who are military contractors making the missiles about how much silver is actually used in there. And we really haven't seen a big increase in it. And it goes back to the whole issue of silver as a strategic or critical metal. There is silver used in missiles. There's silver used in torpedoes. And there's a lot of silver used in military electronic ordnance. But at the end of the day, it's not a significant part of the silver market. And it probably hasn't increased that much due to the war in Ukraine. There has been some increase due to European countries saying we can't rely on the U.S. anymore. We have to increase our military budgets. And those military budgets are heavily loaded with advanced electronics. So there has been some increase probably there, but it's not a significant amount of silver fabrication demand.
Okay, and the last question, what factors enter your calculations for the amount of silver that goes to landfill and is never recovered each year?
Well, what was the first part of that?
What factors enter your calculations for the amount of silver that goes to landfill and it's never recovered each year?
Yeah, it's a that estimate is a derivative, if I may use that term, of our estimates of total refined silver production from all sources and from secondary recovery versus fabrication. So if you have, if you have 800 some odd million ounces of silver being used in a given year, and you have 225 or 250 million ounces recovered, you can sort of say there's a certain amount of metal over time that doesn't get refined, recovered, recycled, and refined and reused. And that's always been the case. And one of the things about silver is that it's used in such small amounts in so many applications that it just doesn't get refined and recovered. So mirrors, I don't know anybody who refines and recovers mirrors. Ball bearings, solders, there's silver that just, some of it goes to landfills, some of it doesn't. Now, in the landfills, you used to have a lot of silver in electronics, but many jurisdictions are now requiring electronics to be recycled, and that silver is being recovered. So the amount of silver being recovered from electronics is falling. The amount of silver being recovered from spent photographic liquids, films, liquids, and papers has also declined. But that stuff was a lot of that was always recovered as it was. Obviously, somebody goes through someone's house and they throw out, boxes of old family photographs. That silver gets lost. So there's always silver that's lost. The other thing is that there's a time difference. Silver photography was cool because most of the silver that was used in a given year in films and papers and solutions was recovered, used. A lot of the silver that was used in the manufacture of films, papers, and solutions was used in the production of pictures and photographs in that year, and the silver was recovered in that year. But in other things, electronics, my wife made me throw away a 1981 boombox that I had in the kitchen this year. Yeah, that thing's got probably more silver than a current radio in it. And it's been around for 42 years. So electronics, you have a time, you can't say, well, this much silver was used in electronics this year and this much silver was recovered from electronics. Ergo, the differential is why, because it's spread out over time. The same thing with autos. The average life of an automobile used to be 8 to 9 years. Now it's, I think, closer to 12 years. So the silver that's being used, the silver that's being recovered from electronics ripped out of deregistered cars today is the silver that was used 10 years ago, 12 years ago on average. So there's less silver coming off the road in deregistered automobiles per vehicle than there is silver that's being used in the manufacture of new vehicles. So there's this time differential that you have to take into account. But over time, you can stretch it out. And if you go back to the very beginning where I showed you that 60 billion ounces of cumulative silver mine production estimated since the beginning of time, 29 or 30 billion ounces of it, half of it was assumed lost to landfills and just thrown away. That's the last question?
Yes, no more questions.
Well, folks, it's been 2.5 hours. I hope this was helpful. If you had a question that you didn't get answered, let us know. And as I said, we do have these quarterly open forums for our clients, and we continue. They don't last 2.5 hours typically. They're open-ended though. And again, it's no format. We have no presentation. It's like ask us questions and we'll try to answer them. And we'd welcome you at our next open forums whenever we hold. Well, we've done the first quarter one, so the next one will be in the second quarter. Thank you. I hope this was helpful. let us know. You can send us information and comments at info@cpmgroup.com. You can go to our website, buy our yearbooks, and look around and see what else we can do for you. Thank you and goodbye.